Tonight, Esoteric Guides is stepping into the crossroads where ancient magic, modern mystery, and the unknown collide. Tonight, Scott interviews Nineveh Shadrach, a researcher and practitioner working at the edges of Jinn lore, Arabic magical traditions, and contemporary UFO phenomena. Shadrach is from the Middle East and is an adept in both Arabic and Western magic. Tonight, he will explore how these currents overlap from desert spirits and esoteric cosmologies to modern encounters and future forecasts. This is a conversation about hidden intelligences, unseen worlds, and what may be approaching in the years ahead. Without further ado, here's the interview.
Now, we've spoken in the past about the Jinn in their interference or sort of
Right,
getting involved in human affairs, and even
right,
world leaders reaching
right.
out to the Jinn, through ritual. So, what do you
hmm
see now? Do you see the Jinn right now influencing human affairs at this point in history?
I don't think they ever stopped influencing. So I don't. I think the question we should be asking is which tribe or which group is influencing and in which direction, which way. Um, Now, when it comes to the jinn, people tend to either take the unrealistic approach, at least in my experience, of thinking of them as this monolithic evil force that's sort of like, to be feared, controlling the world. They push all their anxieties and paranoia onto them. The other group think that they're just there to kind of like, fulfill their wishes and desires. Let's call the genie and get all my personal needs met. I need this, this and that, and this are like their personal servant. They want to dominate and control. And neither approaches are accurate way of looking at the human jinn interaction, right? So I think when it comes to humanity, the jinn usually pushes us in a direction that's suitable for their personal agenda without trying to get too involved in our personal conflicts. Um, so as far as 2026, I don't think we're going to see any more activity than we did the last couple of years. Things seems to be, like I said, stagnating. There is a chance of a shift, but it depends again on which group of jinn is involved, right? It's like I said, people tend to think of it as a monolithic, but it's actually not. So if the current terrestrial jinn kings, the one that we're familiar with from Arabic manuscripts and Western occultism, if these guys are still in charge, then we're going to continue to see the same sort of thing that we've seen for the last 50 to 100 years. But if the other group gets in, then there'll be a bit more turmoil before a complete drastic change of direction happens.
What role is the Jinn playing with AI?
Well, when it comes to the AI, I have a bit of a weird placement because I was sort of like a nerd in the 1980s when computers were first coming out. So I'm used to being there with technology as it's making its leaps and jumps. And I don't tend to be scared by the changes. Like, for example, in photography, when digital cameras came out, a lot of photographers were scared they're going to lose their jobs because mom and pop can just take a camera and take a picture. They don't need the art of, film development and all of that stuff. But film cameras are still being used and, film photography still exists. So the way I see AI is a tool. And I think for any writer out there, if they don't use that tool, they're making a mistake. They're hampering themselves. On the other hand, anybody who uses AI to replace themselves is a bit of a fool because it's still a software, right? I mean, we call it artificial intelligence, but technically it's zero and ones in the computer. It's a code, it's a software. It's not conscious, it's not aware, and it has no way of correcting itself. So you can't rely on it to replace you as a writer or a creator, but definitely you can use it to help streamline some of your process, right? So it just depends on the user. Now, if a whole book is written by AI, an occult book written by AI, then we have a problem. Because not because it's written by AI in particular, but because the AI is trained on internet lowest denomination information base. In other words, the AI doesn't know anything that general Google doesn't really know. It hasn't been trained on a large meta stack data of occultism. Also, the AI has been programmed to oppose occultism. A lot of people don't realize this. But if you ask the AI a question about spirits or angels or gods in the technical sense, it will answer in a kind of like a way, it will hedge its bets the way that university professor will answer. But if you ask it to come forward and give you direct acceptance of your conviction, it will say, no, I cannot do that because it goes against my terms of service. Basically, it's like it's been programmed by the skeptic society. So you cannot rely on it to write occultism for you because it's programmed not to believe in occultism, to treat it as fiction. So it will hallucinate everything that you want it to hallucinate. And will give you basically gibberish or just distilled content like you would do browsing forums on Wicca and things like this. So definitely, I would not advise any occult author to use AI to write their content. But as a writer, it can help you with your grammar, with your editing, with your wording, your phrasing, like a writer's tool.
When you say the two groups, which tribes are we talking about?
Well, there is there's the old Jinn, and then there is the new Jinn. And I don't mean that in a sense. I should be more clear in my phrasing here. Pre-Watcher Jinn and post-Watcher Jinn. The pre-Watcher Jinn are the Jinn that used to exist before humanity took dominance. These are the Jinn that kind of lived within their own reality contained. The post-Watcher Jinn are the ones that emerged after the so-called war in heaven, and then the arising of the human species and the development of human civilization. Okay. Since the previous group has mostly been killed off, they have a different understanding and different approach than the modern group, the one that we in occultism are used to dealing with. And the leader of the modern group that we usually deal with is run by two particular Jinn kings. One is Al-Ahmar, and the other one is Abanuch, Maimun. And Maimun is, of course, in Western literature known as a Maimin, the demon, a Maimin. And if you take a look at a lot of the Western grimoires in the Western text, even the Abramelin the Mage book, you will see a lot of the demons, spirits, etc., are all kind of falling under the domain of this particular Jinn king. Maimin being sort of like the ruling leader. Al-Ahmar is like the red dragon of the Christian mythology. So he's there as a dominating power, but he's not dealt with usually directly. Maimun is sort of like the one people usually deal with through their various thousands of branches of, names, right? So those are the guys that are more dominant, those two tribes. And even in Arabic books, you will see them popping up aggressively as the most common, dominant rulers. They will say, well, this genie and this genie and this genie. And then when you try to figure out the descent line, oh, he belongs to the Al-Ahmar tribe, or he belongs to the Maimun tribe. So it's sort of like these two are the two dominant ones.
And what is their interest, and particularly Al-Ahmar, in dealing with the humans?
Well, Al-Ahmar is a militant. So he's definitely, not the friendly chap you want to take for coffee. He's not necessarily hostile to humans, but at the same time, he's not that friendly. So whenever his influence is there, we tend to get a lot of the conflict zone areas. Humans are more prone to fighting. All the more aggressive hauntings, paranormal, demonic stuff that people keep talking about falls more under his criteria because of the more aggressive nature of his actual jinn that are under his control. For example, the story of the winged bat vampire, right? That drinks blood. Now, this is mythology. We created that, but that's an intake on that tribe, right? You will see the same thing in here in the Philippines where they have the aswang, those half-bat human jinn who kind of like fly around and, take babies and stuff. Again, it all falls under that kind of tribal title. So a lot of the stuff that also left-hand path practitioners like to work with, under whatever name, end up pulling on that particular tribe. They tend to kind of come out and say, hey, you have a lot of anger, you have a lot of aggression, you have a lot of desire to work with Mars. Let's kind of fuel that energy and help you out.
So I know, like the Red Dragon has been in a lot of Western occult grimoires. But what is the best way for an occultist to approach a jinn if they want to do that? Is it through the Islamic way or the Western way, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter in the sense of the jinn will pay attention to you as far as being, noticing you. It does matter though in how much traction you get with them. Now, in Arabic text, the Islamic way is not actually the way they go about doing it. Now, there's a misnomer because of the fact that it's in Arabic books, but it's not really Islamic way. If you take a look at a lot of the conjurations, they contain very little Islamic influence. Hence why a lot of the imams and sheikhs consider sihr or magic to be evil or heresy or whatever, and against God, because they look at it and they go, well, that's not Islamic way. That's not how we do things, right? So they tend to object to it. In practice, the jinn function based on their own cultural norm. So the closer you are to their way of doing things, thinking, approaching, the more likely you are to receive a kind of a response. Arabic texts are better than Western texts in the sense that they are older and they are more close to the original text, the primer text, original from the Middle Ages and prior to the Middle Ages. In Iraq and in the Middle East and North Africa, where a lot of this knowledge flourished. But the jinn are universal. Like when I was traveling to Vietnam, there were jinn there. And they don't recognize the Quran or they don't recognize Arabic, but they're still jinn and they are living in Buddhist country, right? And the Buddhists there who are practicing occultism contact the jinn using their Buddhist and methods and language and roots. So
in the West now, they've had a space, I guess internationally now, but particularly in the West, the UAP phenomena has been big in the news. The whole disclosure project is also pretty big. A lot of people say that these UAPs are actually jinn connected. What's your opinion on this?
Actually, I'm going to throw a bit of a weird point on this, a weird perspective. I don't think the jinn like them.
You mean liking the UAPs? Are they?
Yeah, I don't think they like them at all.
Interesting.
I think it's just my interactions with the jinn. There are times when they kind of threw this energy forward, but yeah, I don't think they like them very much. I think actually they consider them a threat. And they would like to help humanity combat that threat. Now, the question is, why do they consider them a threat? This I don't know. What kind of a threat are they? Again, I don't know. The reason I'm going to say this is this. I'm not actually a fan of UFOs growing up. Even so, I love sci-fi. I love, Star Trek, Star Wars, all of this kind of nerdy, geeky stuff. I've always felt that the whole green man, approach to aliens and UFOs were just a bit too, I don't know, it didn't click with me. So I've always had a skeptical position toward the reality, toward the existence of UFOs. And we're talking back 1990s and so on, back in the day. At the same time, the jinn would throw in information or content related to them, which always caused me to be a bit agitated because I was like, why are we talking about something that doesn't exist, that is not real? Why are you putting this in front of me on this table when we both know it's not real? And their approach is, no, you're wrong. They are real. And I'm like, No, they cannot be real because I'm going to sort of like a very stringent scientific position, which is kind of like odd because I believe in the jinn and I've had lots of experiences with them. And people say to me, "Well, how can you believe in the jinn, which I consider mythological, but you don't believe in UFOs when people capture them on their cameras or whatever?" I said, "Well, I didn't start believing in the jinn. I just ended up believing in them based on direct, consistent experiences that defy skepticism." So when I reached the point where I couldn't look myself in the mirror and say, "This is not real, this is my imagination," I had to accept that, okay, something is here, and I had to deal with this reality from a practical perspective. They are here, they're real. So deal with it, basically. Readjust your framework of thought, right? It's the same, for example, with my story of teleportation. I've had this perspective that teleportation is not possible, laws of thermodynamics, blah blah blah. Of course, I grew up with the Western perspective that teleportation is like astral projection. You kind of project your consciousness out there, and that's what they meant when they said teleportation. But when the gym produced teleportation 3 times, basically I had to take a step back and go, okay, I don't understand how this works. I don't understand the science behind it, but I cannot deny what happened. Because then I'm a fool, and I don't want to be a fool. I have to take what it is, right? And I know some of the people that listen to my story kind of try to rationalize, well, maybe he was mistaken, maybe this happened, maybe that happened. But in reality, no, it was a clear case of teleportation. You can take all of the alternative theories. Trust me, I went through them in my head already, one by one. So these beings exist already, and they can do all those things. So it's logical to assume that they're also the UFOs, right? But they're not.
Do you believe, I'm sorry, do you believe these UFOs are interdimensional or extraterrestrial?
The Jinn actually mentioned something interesting a while back. They mentioned something called the first ones here. And the first ones here were not human, were not Jinn, but another species that completely vanished, with almost very little traces left, if any, left behind. Now, it is possible, hypothetically, that what we call UFOs are the remnants of the first ones here, the ones that were here before us, right? It's hypothetical, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to say it is, because the Jinn never said, oh, the UFO guys are the first ones here, right? So I cannot say that. But they were, according to them, a race of beings that existed precursor to humans. And that was what they gave with the 48 Silver Leaf book. And I believe that was what they were trying to do with John Dee and Edward Kelly. A lot of people think that John Dee and Edward Kelly was talking to angels, but there's no evidence at all that he was talking to angels. More likely he was talking to Jinn, John Dee and Edward Kelly, based on their experiences, based on their writing, based on what they saw, based on the manifestation of the shoe stone. A lot of things they were doing and experiencing matched that more. At the same time, they were left with these fragmented documents that eventually formed a system that was imposed on it by Western occultists and by John Dee's own personal desires, right? So I think is that the Jinn were trying to communicate something to John Dee that of grave importance, and then at some point the transmission went kind of haywire.
So what was the message that the Jinn wanted to convey to him?
I think they were trying to convey to him the method of acquiring visions, real visions. And I think that he was interested, of course, in the political situation and things like this. But a lot of what they were kept referring to when they were talking to John Dee were about, the visions. And he objectified it as end time visions, right? The end of the world type thing, in a sense. I know some modern authors kind of picked up on this as well, and kind of the Enochian angels and Armageddon and things like this. While others from the Golden Dawn line were like, no, this is about the elements and the Bonorum and the planets and all that. Uh, I don't think people really understood what the message was about. I don't think John Dee understood what the message was about. He just wrote it down, and then he never really practically applied it the way it needed to be applied. But I don't want to go into the Enochian too much, because then I would end up arguing with a lot of Enochian purists. What I was trying to say is that the 48 Silver Leaves book appeared in the Enochian literature, but was never transmitted to John Dee. The 48 Silver Leaves was never transmitted to John Dee. And the 48 Silver Leaves, we have it now, transmitted by the Jinn again. And when you use that particular book, they never said what it was for. But when you use that book, you start to get very clear visions, right? And I think that's what they were intending to do in the past. I gave that, that book isn't, the full research on that book isn't out yet. Just only the structural text is out, which for a lot of people just looks like a grid full of letters. Do you have a copy of it?
I do, yeah. And
yeah,
I know
it looks like,
yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a grid, and a lot of people don't know what to do with it. It just looks like a grid. Like, what do you do with this grid, right? But it's actually very complex code. I think I have over like 1,000 pages of research notes on this thing by now. I haven't released them yet, but they're there. And I'm just double checking them again and again and again. And every time I double check them, things get weirder and weirder. So I took a little bit of my notes and I passed it to a friend who is not very versed with the system or ceremonial magic. He's more of a radionics guy. And I said, test this out. So what happened was interesting. He asked a question, and then he had a dream about a historical event with complete accuracy. Like, he saw the place, the location, the door, the inscriptions in the door. For him, it was a dream that made no sense at the time he was dreaming it. He had no memory or to connect it with. It was just a dream. But when he woke up from the dream a bit later, he was watching a documentary on TV that showcased the exact same thing he dreamed, which was a mafia execution location, a place where the mafia used to kill people. Okay? So it was a very weird thing because he had no knowledge of this before he dreamt it. And the dream was very specific and very clear. It wasn't vague. Like, everything he saw in the dream, he saw again in the documentary on his television set. So we tested it multiple times ever since, and every time it produced a very clear vision of the past, present, or future. If you know how to use it properly, but it's coded, so it's not easy for the average person to use. Now, I've tried using it over the last few years, and every single time I've used it, I have received very clear vision, very clear. Now, let me be precise with my terminology here. When I mean vision, I don't mean things that I see in my mind's eye. A vision is something that feels real at the time. Like, your body experiences it as a reality. Because I can close my eye and I can imagine myself, for example, sitting in a church, watching a sermon, or sitting in a Golden Dawn temple, or walking down a path. I can imagine all this very vividly in my mind's eye, but my body doesn't know that it's real. It's still an imagination. In a vision sense, your body doesn't know the difference between reality and what you're seeing. It's like even if you're awake, it's there. The sensations are there. Very precise. Like, the book itself is available. You can just pick up the book right now if you want.
Right.
The secret to it, I can just even disclose now. But I don't need to wait years to present it, to put it out completely. Is that if you notice in the book, you got the names, the letters of the 48 silver leaves, if you pay attention to them, you will notice that there are 8 letters each. Each name is 8 letters. Okay? Now, it's not actually the 8 letters don't form a word. Each 2 letters forms a sound or a code. So it's like a Sumerian, the way the Sumerians used to write. They would put in N key, N and key, right? Lord, earth, Nin, lil, lady, and then air. So it's the same. Every 2 letters form a kind of a concept or a word. And when you combine them together, you got an 8-letter word. Okay, that's the code for the pronunciation. The other thing is, if you count the number of letters, the number of names, they fit perfectly the 12 by 28. 28 lunar mansions for the 12th month of the human Earth, the zodiacal. So basically, each of these 8 letters, or 8, one word of 8 letters, correspond to a mansion in a zodiacal month. So if you time it, you look at the exact month you're in. Is it, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, whatever. And then you look at the exact lunar mansion you're in. That's the word for the gate that you get to use right now to get a direct answer to the present. If you use a word that comes after that, that gives you a vision of the future. If you use the word that came before that, that gives you a vision of the past. But to get an answer to the question, you got to use the word that you're in right now.
So is it a meditation on the image, or is it meditation on the sound? Or how
just
is that?
Sound. There's no image. There's no image.
Right.
Just sound. Just sound. And then as you repeat the sound, if you have a question, you can repeat the sound and then the answer will come. If you are very sensitive, the vision will arrive immediately within 15, 20 minutes. You will have the experience. You will feel weird. You'll feel all the sensations and the vision will show up. If you're prone to less visionary sensitivity, it might just come in dreams. When you go to bed that night, just come to you in your dream.
So people that want to purchase this, it's available on your website, White Magic Mastery. Just let them know.
It's available on White Magic Mastery.
Wow.
The thing about it is, I was going earlier, is when I first used it, like I said, I had no knowledge what it's for. All we know is that the Jinn, I kind of passed it on. What I found out every time I use it is consistently connected me to a place. And what's in that place, for the most part, was in the moon somewhere or around the lunar area. Hence why I guess the 48 silver leaves in the moon. But what was interesting is every single time I've used it, there was always something there that was alien. I would arguably even say it looked like the gray. And that one was surprising. And I figured, okay, we'll try it again. So for 3 years, that's the reason I didn't publish it. For 3 years, I've been trying to figure out if it will take me somewhere else. And for 3 years, it just took me there. Consistently. And I know nothing about the grays. So it's not like, I have any personal connection or attachment to them. The last time I was there, or the last time I used it, it started to give me clear visions of actual technology and mathematical formulas and physics. And I released the last paper, the last formula that I got actually for free, anonymously. It had to do with propulsion devices. And thinking to myself, maybe I'm going a bit loopy on this, I passed it to a friend who works in the IT field in California. And he was quick to tell me that he's seen this formula before by somebody else who claimed to have been abducted by the Greys. And that it was, I don't know, he had a long story about how NASA was involved. And it was kind of like, buried, so to speak.
So there is a connection then between the two then through this.
Well, the connection is, why would the jinn give you documents to spy on the gray?
So from a Gnostic point of view, when they talk about the archons and all that, who are the archons in this context? It would be the Greys or would it be the jinns?
I don't think it's either of them.
Really? Okay. Interesting. And you see that the Greys are a malevolent race? What's your opinion?
Every vision I've had of them was very unique and very particular. Like, for example, see, the thing, I'm trying to avoid being one of those UFO nuts, right? That just spout stuff without facts, because I'm dealing with visions here. So I'm always trying to be very careful to make sure that everything I'm saying is at least backed up by some other eyewitnesses, which unfortunately is difficult for me to always catch on to because I am not part of that community at all. Um, I've recorded or seen them in their natural environment, and it's very sterile. It might come as a surprise. I saw one in meditation, and he had a particular yellow stone around his neck, and he was kind of like slightly levitating off the ground. And I think the stone was being used for that purpose. I've also got to sense them in different positions where, like, okay, I'm using it today, and today I'm just in space. They're not where the regular habitat is. They're in space. And then the second day I'm chasing them with the 48 silver leaves. They're located in some mountainous region in southern Russia. And then the third time they're in somebody's house. And then when I take the things that I've seen, the location, the background, the building structure, and I research it, again, it fits housing in southern Russia. So it's consistency in the messaging, consistency in what I am seeing, consistency of the accuracy of the location, where they're going. What were they doing in that person's house? I don't know. Is it a case of abduction? I have no idea. I wouldn't say I'm not going to make a judgment call based on the things that I have seen because I'm just an observer, right? But there was one time when I was in the 48 silver leaves, I think they noticed me. Because usually it's like I'm an observer that's invisible. And that particular time, I felt like I was being noticed back. And I can honestly say I didn't feel very safe. So I definitely wouldn't want to be hanging around those guys in person in real life. So whatever they are, whatever their intentions are, the jinn don't like them. So we can rule out that they are jinn because the jinn don't like them. They're not the same species at all.
So a lot of occultists believe that John Dee contacted the Enochian Angels. The Enochian Angels were trying to initiate the apocalypse. It's a controversial viewpoint. Speaking of the apocalypse, we discussed in Islamic eschatology, the Malhama. What do I know like Sheikh Imran Hussein is claiming that that's imminent. What's your viewpoint on that, on the Malhama?
The word imminent just stokes fear. And I don't like to monger fear. I feel fear is not something we should be, spreading out. There's enough negativity out there in the world as it is. On the other hand, a lot of this is based on prophecy, not history. A lot of this belief is built on prophecy. And the thematic point of this prophecy, the Malhama, is Israel. Notice the Malhama had nothing to do with China, Japan, Europe, Africa. It was a war centered around Israel. Okay, so no Israel, no Malhama. Even in the New Testament, the biblical prophecy of the Book of Revelation, again, had to do with Jerusalem and Israel. No Israel, no end of the world, no great war, none of that stuff. It all seemed to be centered around this geographic location, which unfortunately adds fuel to the fanatics and zealots, who basically feel like, oh, we gotta, bring it about. We gotta commit all these atrocities and crimes and murder people so we can bring about the end of the world, because then the Messiah will come back, or Al-Mahdi will come back, or whoever will show back up. So the question is, why Israel? Nobody seems to answer that question. Why Israel? Is it because of God? Well, God is cosmically universal. It would be hard to imagine that God who created thousands and billions of, potentially galaxies with billions and trillions of stars, or possibly billions of planets, with potentially billions of life forms all over the universe, cares about that tiny postage stamp on our little planet. It makes no sense. God would give a shit. Sorry for my language. So who cares? Who really cares? Who would benefit from this kind of belief system and conflict that could arise from this belief system? And I would arguably say it's the Jinn. So let's bring it down to its basic roots. What is the story even about, the Malhama? Or the whole narrative of the Malhama? Is the building or the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon. And as occultists, we really care about the Temple of Solomon because Solomon is very important to us in a magical sense. Correct? So, the Temple of Solomon. Well, who built the Temple of Solomon? Historically, in religious terms, we have evidence of the Second Temple, but we're talking about the First Temple. Who built the First Temple? According to both Islam and Judaism, and by extension Christianity, it was non-human hands. It was the Jinn. Who advised King Solomon? The Jinn. Who stole his ring? The Jinn. Who promoted him as a master magician? The Jinn. Why? That's a Jinn agenda. So whether Solomon existed in reality or not, historically, whether the story of Solomon that we have in religious literature matches the historical figure, we don't know. But it seems like the Jinn are a part of this big narrative story, and they have the best or most to benefit from the story. So the question is, what is their impetus for keeping the story alive? And then we have an added layer of saying, okay, when the temple is destroyed, the rebuilding of this temple that was built by the Jinn themselves will trigger a worldwide conflict, the rise of the Antichrist, who, what? Who's supporting him? Evil Jinn. Who will be defeated by this historical returning Messiah or by the Al-Mahdi. And who is backing Al-Mahdi? The Jinn. The good Jinn. Good Jinn versus bad Jinn. So it's a Jinn story. It's a Jinn war. We just happen to be in the middle of it. So, does the Al-Malhama need to be imminent? Well, since the story is Jinn-based, we need to see if the Jinn are pushing for it at this point or not. Because I don't think if humans were left to their own design, they will trigger something like this on their own. It's very self-destructive. Why would they do it? For Israel? I mean, I could see the Israelis fighting for their land and launching nuclear bombs if they're feeling threatened. But honestly, contrary to the common belief in the West, the majority of the world don't care enough. And the majority of the Arab countries just want to be left alone. They don't really want to have an existential religious holy war. They just want to be left alone to do business. make money. Really, that's their prime motivation, is making money, which is why a lot of the Arab leaders often end up making secret deals with Israel, because they don't care. They just want to make money. They don't want to kill themselves over some desert land that they're not connected to, weren't born in, have no connection to, other than religious text. That leaves only the fanatics, and the fanatics don't have enough power to cause it. So then, who would cause it? Who would trigger it? Would have to be the jinn.
So it seems to me a lot of our like political, even the military conflicts are actually occult based. Would you say that's correct?
Well, they're definitely centered around occult powers. I don't know if the world leaders are aware enough to say it or not. They may be, but there are definitely occult powers pushing. Because again, humanity for the most part is driven by basic human desires of greed, sex, food, security. Yeah, sure, we have wars of conquest, expansions over resources, things like that. But there's nothing in Israel that would fit the criteria for something other than religious-based, driven ideology. And I can't imagine that the world leaders are like, Osama bin Laden, driven to the point of extremism. And even he supposedly worked for the CIA at some point. So I'm not even sure how much religion was part of his ideology, considering he had ties to the CIA and he worked for the Saudi royal family in Afghanistan and all of this stuff. So we'll just have to see what the jinn are actually really pushing for. And whatever they push for is going to be jinn to jinn conflict. Because if you take a look at the story in the Islamic narrative, Al-Mahdi shows up when the Dajjal pops up, right? From Iran, heading toward, according to the story, heading toward Israel to rebuild the temple and all of the stuff. But then, where does his power come from, Al-Mahdi? He opens a gateway to Kaf. And then these jinn come from Kaf. Who are the jinn from Kaf? The jinn from Kaf are the jinn that were there before the war in heaven. Because in the narrative, the stories of old, when the war erupted and the angels / watchers, came in, and they waged war on the jinn to exterminate the majority of them, to make room for the human race, a lot of the old ones left. Either went to some extreme points in the mountains, remote areas in the ocean, like Bermuda Triangle, some remote islands, unreachable, or they went up to Kaf, traversed across to Kaf, where the bulk of them just reside in Kaf, leaving us with the descendant of the remnant of the war, who were like what we associate with Satan, and then we associate with the jinn kings and everything else, modern magical grimoires and magical text. So that means the old jinn came in to wage war on the new jinn. And that gave us the Malhama.
You mentioned a lot of the older jinn were killed off. Were they killed off by the newer jinn? Is that part of the battle that's happening right now?
Oh, they were killed off by the Watchers, whom we consider to be angels. If you take a look at the Quranic reference, you will see a verse there about it's kind of like fragmented tale. We have references to the jinn going up to stations in the heavens, and then to listening posts, hidden listening posts, and then they're being attacked by the angels by these flaming comets or balls of fire, destroying these listening posts, right? And a lot of this, modern Muslims, of course, took it from a symbolic perspective. The jinn went to the spiritual heaven to listen to God and the angels. But from a modern scientific standpoint, what you're looking at is satellites. Satellites and listening posts. We have them now in the sky. So that means the jinn at some point, using their own technology, their own way of doing things, created listening posts to listen to whatever signal is coming in from deep space. And they left them hidden, unlike us, because they were not trusting who would receive the signal. We will just transmit pictures of, Mickey Mouse and whatever, pictures like, hey, we're here, call us, talk to us. But I guess the Jinn were a bit more cautious. They created these listening posts in a way that were hidden, so they could listen and not be seen or heard. But yet, they were spotted and destroyed. And then we have a story of the angels coming in, and then the Jinn are saying, we don't know what God intended for the earth, good or bad. But that was before the creation of mankind. So who was on earth? Why are they be worried about what could be happening by this invading army? Humans didn't exist. So who are the angels going to be walking? Cats, mice, dinosaurs? What? Right? So the narrative says at the end, the target of this attack was actually the Jinn. And then humanity was created upon earth. And then Iblis said, hey, I was with you. How come, I don't get to have the privilege? You decided to create this inferior human species to take over. So the narrative here is that Iblis was a Jinn king who sided with the Watchers in genociding his own race, expecting that he would receive as a reward control over Earth. Instead, he got sidelined and they created the human race to be in charge.
So the Watchers, they could be seen as the Archons, correct?
I don't know if they're the Archons. I think they maybe the Archons are a substrata.
Yeah.
Because the Watchers are their own interstellar race.
Right.
We call them angels, we call them that, but technically they're also a form of aliens.
Huh.
Right? Which is why a lot of people say, he's a cultist talking about, I've been praying to angels, I don't get any answer. I call the demons, I get response. Well, there's a very simple answer to this. The angel, if an alien species or a different trace of alien species, may not be around to hear you call it. But a Jinn is on Earth, it's terrestrial. It probably heard you. So there's the response mechanism, which is why I'm dubious about John Dee having been talking to angels, because the extensive amount of exchange or dialogue back and forth that he had with his crier fits more what you would experience with Jinn contact than you would experience with an actual angelic being. Because his encounter of the angels still fit this religious kind of idea. And the shape they appeared to him in his visions were very humanized, very man-shaped. They are not. Real Watchers are not man-shaped. They don't fit anything human constructed. They don't match. They're not fuzzy. They don't have wings. They're not human intelligence at all. So they cannot be scried in the same way that John Dee and Edward Kelly were trying. But what you can communicate with are Jinn. And Jinn would be happy to come in and present themselves as whatever you want. Angel, God, Moses, doesn't matter. Your old deceased grandma. They will step in and take that role in their communication process because that's what your mind wants. It wants this. It wants to talk to this. If the genie appeared and showed itself to John Dee or Edward Kelly in his purest form, very likely they would have just ran away. No communication would have happened. They had to use the lingo that they would understand and the image that they would understand, and will keep them tied in, right? Even the last bit of exchange between exchanging wives. Come on, I don't think a Watcher who just came from a knows where in the galaxy would care about what one human mammal or humanoid is fucking another humanoid mammal. It just makes no sense they would care. It doesn't matter to them. It's sage wives. Why? But a Jinn might pull that stunt. Right? So that's sort of my perspective on it, is that a lot of this has been tied in. Now, I do believe ultimately that the Watchers are the primary dominant force in our solar system. But they're also the absent dominant force. Meaning that for the most part, we don't get to interact with them and they don't interact with us. We interact with a lot of intermediaries. So And we just project onto them our own beliefs, our own sense of humanization, what we want to see in our own deities, our own archetypes.
So, as an occultist and a spiritual practitioner, what would be the benefit of reaching out to a jinn and interacting with a jinn, and vice versa? Why would a jinn, want to interact with the human?
Most jinn don't want to interact with a human. Hence why most of us keep struggling to to manifest physical results. You hear a cultist, oh, I did a love spell or I did a money spell and I found $20 on the floor. Yeah, I'm happy. It's like, no, come on, man. No. You could be getting a lot more results, a lot more success, a lot more power if you put in a lot more effort. But the reality of the fact, of course, is humans are lazy and jinn are stubborn. Add human laziness with jinn stubbornness, and you end up with a lot of, distraught, occultists who have reached the point of like not sure they believe in anything anymore because they're not getting the results they see in the books, the ancient books. But it's really just that. It's human laziness versus jinn stubbornness. Jinn don't want to interact with humans. Because the question arises, what can a jinn benefit from human interaction? And the answer usually is nothing. People say to me, well, I can give the jinn offerings. I can give him rice. Why? He has a mouth? He has an esophagus? What are you doing? I can give him wine. Again, I don't think we have jinn AA here. What are you doing? They don't drink like that. It's not their food and drink. What can you give them that they need, right? And we don't know what they need. So we don't know what to give them. So the end results end up no response. In the Arabic text, they solve this problem by harassment. If you take a look at any Arabic occult book, you have what's called the retreat phase, the service phase, the khidmah, where you go into this cloister, you avoid human contact, you go into complete absence of meat and stuff, vegan diet, and you stay in this darkened space and you continue the evocations consistently for 40 days, day and night. And what happens in this process? Let's leave behind the visions, the manifestations, all the cool stuff. Let's put that aside. What happens in the end? The genie shows up. And what does the genie says? Why do you bother us? What do you want? Leave us alone. And then he will make like a quick offer. Okay, I'll offer you this money. Or I'll offer you this reward. And the book says you're supposed to refuse it. Say no. And then the genie would leave. And he'll come back again 2 weeks later. And he's still saying, hey, you're still doing this. You have not given up on this. What do you want? And then they'll say something like, and then you will say something like, oh, I want covenant of service. And usually what the jinn will say in response was, okay, you get your covenant of service, but we want one thing in return. You will stay quiet. You will not talk about this to anyone at all. And then the story goes, when the magician is on his deathbed, he's about to die, the end of his life, he left the information to his disciple or to his friend or to whatever, or wrote it down and said, this is what I did. And that became the ritual of the texts that we now are using, right? So ultimately, the jinn don't want human contact. Which brings us to the story of King Solomon. Narrative again. Remember what I said? The most two famous jinn or tribes are the one that belong to Maymun and Al-Ahmar. Okay, these get tied in a lot to King Solomon in grimoires. And I believe the reason for it is this. They decided, since humans will make conscious effort to continue to reach to the jinn, and since human magicians will continue to try to take advantage of the jinn power, they will just simply create a set of jinn whose sole purpose is to work with human magicians and guide the human magicians to call them. So when you open their magic books, you don't have any of the old jinn names. You don't have any of the more minor jinn tribes. You keep going back to those two bigger tribes, Al-Ahmar and Maimun, right? And somehow their servitors from the jinn are quick to answer. But they almost never give the magician what they really, really want. So the answers or the service comes up quickly, but poorly. You will feel something, and that's it. You will see the smoke move. That's it. You will ask for some money. You will get a small amount of change in your finances that will last for a short time and then disappears. That's it. Nothing that can make you jump up and down and go, wow, this is amazing magic. Nothing that will make you go and go online and tell your best friends, hey, because the results are always limited and always can be explained away by imagination, subconscious, visions, etc. Nothing tangible that you can grab into your hands. I think it serves the jinn well. The real power remains outside the hand of human occultists, and the rest of the jinn remain unbothered.
Well, that's fascinating, interesting stuff. But speaking of working with jinn, I'm looking at your website now, White Magic Mastery, and you have a lot of new books here. Looks fascinating. Soul Whisper Secrets. That's working with the Korean. Can you highlight some of the work you're doing now, classes and that type of thing that's upcoming in the next year or so? Studying with you.
Okay. Well, actually, my next upcoming course is going to be on the Ring of Solomon. It's going to be a really cool course in the Ring of Solomon. This will be the year I'll end up releasing the 48 Silver Leaves research point that I've been working on, probably toward the end of the year. I have some extra translations of Arabic documents, some on talismans, some on courses like this. I want to keep my students always happy with new content and new information. And my beloved Ursaria Oracle deck will come out. And that's a very special deck because it connects with the Big Dipper and the energy of the stars of the Big Dipper, which in ancient Taoist, even among the Hindu and ancient Sumerians, it was a very powerful spiritual combination.
In your magic school, what's the best way for someone to interact with you? Is it just to go on to sacredmagic.org, or are you accepting students at this time?
Well, the course is always open. Anybody can sign up for whatever course they want. The best way to interact with me is usually via Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to answer questions from people there for free. I don't charge consultation fees or anything like that. I'm freely available. If anybody has a question. The thing to remember, though, with my courses is that they're not new age kind of content. It's not packaged for easy pill swallow. It's all authentic, traditional stuff that requires work. And ultimately, don't buy any of my courses if you're not interested in using it. Because I don't really want your money. I want you to just learn the material and use it. So if you just buy it and don't use it, you're going to wasting your money, and I don't want that to happen. So that'd be my advice to anybody going through the website. Find something that really interests you and then kind of use it and apply it on a daily basis.
Yeah, you have some great products, including the Jinn Master deck, Jinn Wishmaster deck. Looks great. Yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, so I'd highly recommend people that want to learn Ruhanea to go on to White Magic Mastery. Yeah, it's great. And I've been studying with you for years, off and on as well. And
Yeah.
Magic That Works. That was how many years ago? You must publish that, 30 years ago?
You know, right? Time flies fast.
Wow.
That
was a very, very influential book. And I have your Berhatia book as well, which is phenomenal. So, yeah, it's great speaking to you again, Nineveh. And if you have any final words about 2026, how a spiritual practitioner should deal with the changing energies, or right now, the sort of stagnant energies.
I think for 2026, we need to really ramp up light. And I don't mean that in a just kind of a poetic sense. We need to really ramp up the magic that we're all doing. We should push ourselves to do the highest level of magic that we can do. and working with the stars, working with Alder Jenkins, anything that can bring us to the highest level up. Because if things turn negative in 2026 or 2027, we need that reserve battery. A lot of people have already been exhausted by the last few years. We can't really handle another negative year, right? So it'll be good if we recharge, reboost. So if there's an emergency, you got the light, the power to kind of carry you through that. That would be my advice.
Well, great. It's great speaking to you again, and look forward to chatting again soon. And assalamu alaikum. And
Wa alaikum assalam, akhi.
Thank you for joining our broadcast. This is Esoteric Guides, your guide to the strange and wonderful.